Welcome to the Just Happy to Be Here podcast. It's me, Tanner, and as always, I am just happy to be here. This is episode 50. That's right, our 50th episode. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. After podcasting with Taylor for the last several months, I think that we are finally beginning to find our groove as podcasters. Now, if you've been listening to the podcast, you know that we often boast how we are professional podcasters, and it's true. We are professional podcasters, but it does take a little bit of time for us to find our groove or our rhythm, and I think that we're finally beginning to hit that stride. This episode 50, is another one of my favorite episodes that we've gotten to record. I always love getting to joke around with Taylor, and we do plenty of that in this episode. But it's always good for my soul when the conversation turns serious. In this conversation today, it does turn serious. So before we jump into this episode 50, which I'll mention about 50 more times, we do want to say thank you. Thank you for listening to our podcast, for supporting this show, for spreading it around the internet, for sharing it with your friends. It really does mean a lot. We love getting to record these conversations, and we love getting to share them with you. So thank you for your kind messages. Thank you for your feedback. Continue to send your questions, your insights, whatever you'd like to share with us. You can send all those comments to writtentospeak@gmail.com. Again, that's writtentospeak@gmail.com. And so with that, I'm done with this intro. It's been way too long. I apologize. So with that, this is episode 50 of the Just Happy to Be Here podcast. Rock and roll.
And roll. Don't just rock only.
You have to roll a little bit. Taylor, we have talked on the phone now for about 15 minutes. And I mean, you shouldn't rank conversations that you have with people. Maybe you should. But that was one of the best conversations that we had, and we didn't record it. And I think I stopped you mid-sentence. I was like, we need to record what we're talking about.
Wrap that up. Wrap it up right now.
Wrap it up. We're gonna have to just 3, 2, 1, go start the podcast, record all the things that we're talking about. But here we are. Episode 50, by the way. This is episode 50 of the Written to Speak podcast meets the Just Happy to Be Here podcast, and the Just Happy to Be Here podcast prevails.
Is that like when we were in elementary school where it's like the alligator? Well, that's greater than, less than. It's not greater than or less than. It's new. It's newer than. I
think it's like the greater than equal to, right?
Yeah. That was a thing.
Yeah, it could have been a thing.
Maths.
I can remember Googling greater than symbol at least 10 times a year. Like, just like, there were times in my head where I was like, what is it again? And I just couldn't remember. And I was like, is it eating it, or is it being eaten by it? I was like, I don't know. I don't know.
I was with you.
It's all the things that, and I've been trying to write a kid's poem about this, where it's...
Have you really?
But I want to put into a poem all the things that you might get confused with something else, right? Like, dessert, does it have 2 S's or 1? Like, what's desert and what's dessert? Well, dessert has 2 S's because you want 2 desserts and not 1 and not 2 deserts. That's how it goes in my head, and I think that's correct.
Good.
It could be wrong, but the things that you like
helpful.
second guess yourself, like with like greater than or not. So I'm trying to write a poem about that. Trying to write a poem about a lot of things. But this is episode 50, and I thought for our 50th episode that we needed to do something special. However, I didn't plan anything special, so it's just going to be a normal episode.
It'll just be a milestone in and of itself.
Which feels pretty on par for us. This isn't going to be a space episode. We're not drafting space movies, at least not that I know of. But
surprise!
Surprise!
It's not happening.
We're recording this from Mars.
Oh man, it's so great up here. Get up here, you guys.
Three things that need to be celebrated on April 29th.
They sure do.
Today is National Zipper Day. And I do think that zippers should have their own national day. Like,
Yeah,
this
that
is
feels
one.
right.
This is one that I respect quite deeply, because I've used zippers for most of my life. I would venture to say all of my life I've been using zippers in one way or another. So happy National Zipper Day. A quote that I would like to read to you from a website I was reading about the history of the zipper is this. A landmark moment happened in 1937 when the zipper beat the button in the Battle of the Fly. Have you ever owned or attempted to wear a pair of pants that did not have a zipper but instead had buttons where
Just
the zipper
buttons?
should be? Yes.
I don't know. I've seen them, and I was like, that is a horrible idea.
It's wrong. It is not close. I one time tried to own a pair of pants. I bought them on the internet, didn't realize that pants came with buttons instead of a zipper, and I had to return them because I'm not spending that much time doing that there. I'm just not doing. It's not acceptable, and it's not comfortable. And that's all I'll say about that. So happy National Zipper Day. Today's also National Shrimp Scampi Day, which happens to be my favorite kind of scampi. Is there any other kind of scampi? I don't know.
It's a great question. I certainly don't have the answer.
And lastly, today is National Poem in Your Pocket Day, which for me is actually just about every day.
Yes.
Always got a little poem in my pocket. And actually, I'm going to read a poem later on in today's episode. So happy 50th episode.
Oh, man.
But I think
Will you take it out of your pocket?
Nope. I will take it off of the internet.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
But it's really the world's pocket, you know?
Ooh. That is beautiful. That's a poem itself. The internet is the world's pocket.
It's yours.
It's yours. And it's pretty gross and dirty. and you don't want to have your hand in there for too long.
No.
That's for sure.
No. You definitely don't want to dig too deep.
Oh, because if you do...
the pocket.
You don't want to get...
All sorts of chewed foods.
Crumbs. You don't want to go to the dark side of the pocket.
No.
No. 50th episode. How's your week been?
The week has been good, man. We're busy here in Des Moines. I know a lot of people think that Des Moines is just never busy because it's smack dab in the middle of Iowa. But we get busy here, man. And my wife and I are. I think we're gonna try to get a little hike in this upcoming weekend. Kind of get out and just enjoy. Some outdoorsiness and not be on kind of a breakneck paced schedule, which I'm very much looking forward to, because it's been a good week, been a busy week, for sure,
that.
man. Yeah,
Feel that.
You feel that? Do you feel that?
I feel that. I'm not somebody who can pull off saying that. At least I don't think so. I feel that. Do you? Well, maybe I can, because I literally feel just about everything. I feel too much. But I'm just happy to be here. And I meant to mention at the beginning of the episode, apologies to everybody who tried to listen to the episode first thing last week, episode 49. I uploaded the wrong audio. I believe I just uploaded one person's audio. So the way that Taylor and I record is we record individually. We're talking, we're hearing each other through a phone call, but we're recording ourselves into a microphone, and then I put the audio together and then send it out into the pocket of the world,
Science.
which is the internet. And last time I only sent out one of ours to the world, and so thank you to Holly and a few others for letting me know that I failed. But the episode was titled "Mediocre at Best," so I feel like it was the right time to make that mistake.
Perfect.
I feel like that was the right time to make a mistake. So this is episode 50, mediocre at best, part 2. So we'll see how it goes.
Nothing like a good two-parter in a podcast.
Someone has to do it, and I think that's us. I want to jump in because this is going to be kind of where our conversation left off before we started recording, which is pretty rude to tell people. You missed the best part of the episode because it didn't even get recorded.
Man, wish you were there.
I wish you were there because we were just happy to be there. Taylor, what did you recently Google?
So I recently Googled, I actually initially came across this guy by accident, but then intentionally Googled him after that. But this guy is, his name is Daryl B. Excuse me. I keep wanting to call him Daryl B. Harrelson. It's not that. He's not related to Woody Harrelson in any way. Daryl B. Harrison, excuse me, and he works for a ministry organization. Organization. Yeah, that's right. We'll go with that. Works for a ministry organization called Grace to You. He's actually their social media director and also a bit of a theologian himself. And just a lot of good stuff. He's also the co-host. We don't normally make it a huge habit of boosting other podcasts, but he is the co-host of the Just Thinking podcast. If you're looking for another good podcast,
but we should mention it's not better than our podcast, and you shouldn't leave us for them. However, if you have plenty of time in your week and you're looking to add something, we suggest that this is. I've never listened to an episode, so I can't really say for sure, but I trust Taylor, so you can. We want to give you permission to go do that, but we also want to let you know that you can never leave us.
At least we're letting the listeners know.
We gotta know. We gotta let them know our true feelings.
Yeah.
Just kidding. just kidding. Ha ha ha. But don't. But seriously.
But seriously, don't.
Seriously,
ever. Stay right here.
Never
don't touch that dial.
Don't touch that dial.
But he actually, on his Instagram, posted a quote, not by him, which is maybe a little facetious. It's kind of like that Michael Scott quoting Wayne Gretzky situation.
Yeah.
But incredible quote. He says, "Take a saint and put him into any condition, and he knows how to rejoice in the Lord." And originally that was written by Walter Craddock, who was a Welsh Anglican clergyman living in the 1600s. But Tanner, we were talking about this, and just it is often, in many situations, hard to rejoice in the Lord, and in our brokenness, in our sinfulness. Sometimes this is, or even often, this is not necessarily our first reaction, and it takes a bit for us to get there. But we rely on the work of the Holy Spirit. We rely on the work of the Word of God in us to dig deep in situations. And I know that this has been the case, and God has been very, very gracious in helping me to get there. I think more and more. I think I'm growing in this. But to be in any condition, any situation, and be able to recognize that, man, the Lord is my strength. I can rely on the fact that He is orchestrating things in such a way that it is for my good. He's working all things together for my good, even if I can't see it right now. And often we can't. Often we are in the middle of conditions and situations where it doesn't possibly look like this could get better. And it is precisely then that God does His best work. Why Paul talks about the importance of boasting all the more in his weaknesses is because God's power is made far more evident there because if we're just good, if we're just strong, if we're just doing our, we do our best and we make it, and we're able to kind of do that. That has a very, very short shelf life, and we will hit a wall where we will hit a point where we can't keep pulling ourselves up and can't keep relying on ourselves. And so it's precisely in those moments where God's power is made so evident, because he makes it so clear that only he could be responsible for working something so difficult into something so beautiful. And I think with stuff like this, I constantly think about the story of Joseph, who was able to recognize that even though his brothers sold him into slavery, he spent at least 13 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. Being able to realize that God did it, so that God might be glorified, and so that in the end Joseph could actually recognize that and reconcile with these guys that sold him into slavery, and just the beauty that God is able to create out of situations, conditions, whatever is going on in your life. Really, really, we can trust the sovereignty of God to bring it about. And so I'm thankful for that, thankful for this quote. It's definitely not always my first reaction, but I hope I'm growing, and I pray that God is growing me in that.
Yeah, and as we were talking before the podcast, and you brought this quote up then too, and I'll read the quote again, because sometimes when I listen to podcasts or sermons and someone mentions something, and then I was like, wait, what were they talking about again? But the quote is, "Take a saint and put him into any condition, and he knows how to rejoice in the Lord." And you and I were talking and just kind of sharing some things, and I mentioned how I had a thought earlier this week where it felt pretty hopeless, and I thought, it's like surface level, I was like, there's just no way out of this. Like, it's just always going to be like this. But I knew that wasn't true. And I knew, like, deep down the truth was, hey, like, he's got you, right? Like, there is hope in this. Like, all the things that I write, all the poems that I put in my pocket, like, I know that hope doesn't let the story end. I know that, and all that is heavy, that there is hope. And sometimes it's just hard, and it's just difficult. But I think, like, when we talk about saints, we're also talking about the people that were surrounded, that they had themselves surrounded by. Like, they weren't doing it alone.
Yeah,
like,
that's right.
Like, we have people who can remind us of the truth, who can point us to the light, and who can sit with us in our sorrow, because there are times where it's important for us just to sit with the grief, to sit with the pain, to sit with the questions, but to also look above, right? It's that verse from Colossians, right? Like, keep your eyes on things that are above. Earlier this week, I was on the internet, as I often do because I'm alive, and which also is kind of a sad statement. But anyways, we're not here to talk about that. But one of my favorite NBA writers and thinkers, I guess you could say, he writes for The Ringer, which is a popular sports website, podcast, all that kind of stuff. His name's Jonathan Sharks, and he just announced that he has cancer. And I would say he's pretty close to our age, at least young 30s, mid 30s, but he's got cancer. And I don't know the guy. But as I sat there and, like, read through it and kind of read through some of the things that he had posted, and a while back he had written an article about how he's a Christian and how he's a believer in Jesus. And it's kind of weird because for a lot of, these huge sports companies based out in LA, there's not a lot of talk about Jesus or faith. And oftentimes, and he's mentioned this before, he's like, I'm not laughed out of the office, but it definitely isn't one of those things where it's embraced or celebrated. If anything, he's the outsider in this. But just kind of thinking about this quote, like, take a saint and put him into any condition, and he knows how to rejoice in the Lord. and just in some of the things that he's saying, and now what his wife has been posting, it's continuing to be faithful to the end, and continuing to trust until the end, and continuing to rejoice in all circumstances until the end. And I mean, I gotta say, it's exhausting, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's beautiful. But I think the exhausting things can also be quite beautiful. So I've been kind of racking my mind just with that, and with the heaviness of life, with how fragile life is.
Yeah.
And it just makes me thankful for the promise and the hope of heaven. And I think we talk about that a lot on our podcast, and or at least we talk around it. But the hope of heaven, and man, I am clinging to that, especially after the year that we've had. And I think we'll say this every year after the year that we had, and the year that we're heading into. We're always going to say that, because something heavy is always going to happen, and something fragile is always going to break, and we're going to see it, and we're going to get closer to it every year, it seems like. So, man, I do love this quote. Take a saint and put him into any condition, and he knows how to rejoice in the Lord.
Dude. Yeah, it's a convicting quote, because it's a reminder to rejoice when I don't necessarily want to. And it's also a really, really comforting reminder of, oh yeah, I can rejoice. I have this, because of God's work in my soul, I can rejoice. And if I could just close out this part before we go to what you Googled, Tanner, with James 1, 2 through 4. I love how James puts this, and I think it ties this part in a bow nicely. It says, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing." And I'm so grateful for that, because we've got it's the dual hope, right? It's the hope of the future, the hope of heaven, just what you were talking about, and it's the assured hope that the trial that I face right now isn't purposeless, but it is producing, and that's great hope.
And to close out what you're trying to close out, and maybe this is right, but there's no place to make a mistake like on a podcast that will never go away forever. When I think about rejoicing, I think I always, compare it to or think of like singing, or dancing or celebrating. But what if like rejoicing looks a lot like exhaling, or like slowing down, or like being still, or like, just trusting. Yeah. It may not be this shout of joy or shout for joy, but maybe it's just an honest exhale and saying, I trust, right? It's kind of goes back to what Paul was saying too. Like, he's writing this from prison. He's got to be exhausted. It's going to be hard to sing a shout of praise, or to blow the shofar, but maybe it's just like a quiet prayer. I don't know. Anyways.
Well, and man, I think there's a lot of truth to that, because, if all joy is, all rejoicing is just kind of an emotional thing, like emotions can go away in a second. Like I can be happy, and I can get a text from a family member, and that's just sapped out of me in a split second. But yeah, I love that whenever God's word talks about joy and rejoicing, that's such a good point, man, that you're bringing up, because it goes far deeper than just I'm chasing around emotional happiness in this kind of way to just be, dancing and singing and smile on my face and air guitar rocking. I did not mean to break into Sadie Hawkins dance, but that's what happened.
In my khaki pants, which have a zipper and not buttons, because buttons are gross.
That's right. If it's just buttons, it's gross.
Yeah.
I'm so thankful for that, because that joy speaks to something deeper that exists regardless of the situation, and rejoicing. Yeah, I think you're spot on, man. It's an exhale. It's a resting, knowing that my God is good and constantly in control, and my attempts to try to be that or do that on my own are self-defeating, but he lovingly invites me into a better way.
Well, I think that's the podcast. Just kidding. I have two things. I have two things that I Googled.
Yes.
To make a short story long, let me tell you this. I ordered a printer, and I have a printer, but I wanted to have a little printer that just prints like 4x6 shipping labels for when somebody purchases anything from writtentospeak.com/store, where you can use the code podcast20 to get 20% off your order today. That's writtentospeak.com/store. But I wanted to get like this little printer for it. And it's one where it like sits on your desk, you plug it in, and you can print. And Taylor, I cannot tell you how frustrating printers can be. You would think that it would just be like this easy thing you plug in, you download the hardware, and it works. No. Not even close. Not even close. It was a frustrating couple of hours that I never got the printer installed. It's sitting in the box. I have to return it. But I was so frustrated by it that I was like, I need something that's going to cheer me up. I needed to find a way to rejoice in the sorrow. So I remembered a video from a while ago that just made me cackle. Right? It's a fantastic word. Made me cackle. And so I Googled cats with cheese on their face. And the video is titled Cat Cheese Challenge. And basically what people do is they film their cat and they throw like slices of Kraft cheese on their face, and the cats become paralyzed and they like fall backwards. It's the funniest thing I've ever seen. It's like it's my go-to. Goodness. I'm having a rough day. I want to have a pain in my side. So that's the video that I watch, and I'm gonna put that in the show notes because it's worth watching and worth maybe crying over.
Oh man, everybody needs a little bit of that.
Yeah, no matter what you think about cats, it's worth it. And then the second thing that I Googled, and I sent this out in an email in a post on the internet. Never heard of it, but this
first time
I came across this quote by poet Mary Oliver, and the quote is, and we're putting a lot of quotes into this episode. I love it. But the quote is, "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" And I love that. And I've heard of Mary Oliver. And I knew she was a poet. I knew she was a great poet, but I never like dug, whatever, into her work. Dove. That's right. I never dove into her work. And so I did. I ordered 3 books off of Amazon of her work. And my mistake was I ordered one where it was like the best of Mary Oliver, and then like some other books I probably could have just ordered the best of, but whatever. But that quote, that question, "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life," is from the poem Summer Day, which might be one of her more famous poems. And I thought that since today's our 50th episode, we don't have anything regarding space. It's National Poem in Your Pocket Day. It might be good to share this poem. So the late Mary Oliver wrote this, and this is called Summer Day, and it ends with the question that I just shared. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean, the one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? So tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Now, Taylor, I am a poet, right? But I wouldn't say like, I absolutely love poetry. Right? And as I say that, I'm like, is that true? No, I do. Here's the thing. I do love poetry, but it's not like all the books that I read are poetry books. Like, I have a hard time reading other poets because sometimes I'm just like, this isn't my language. And it's kind of like music as well, where it's like I'm not listening to Miley Cyrus because that's not my language. Unless it's Party in the USA, and then I'm throwing my hands up.
It's all of our languages.
Right. But Mary Oliver, I think she speaks my language. And for some reason, like this poem and all the poems that I've read by her, like they make sense to me. And when you find somebody who makes sense, at least in my experience, you just want to read everything that they have to share, and you want to learn about their life, and I really enjoy the honesty and the simplicity of this poem, but also like the imagery that comes forward, but also that she also kind of gives you a little challenge, which is, tell me, what is it that you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? And I'm not asking you for an answer for that question, and I'm not going to share my answer because I'm still trying to figure out what it is. It's probably a Bible verse, though. Let's be honest. But I think it's a good question, to kind of hold on to and to lean into. What is it that you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? And maybe I will give you my answer, because my answer might just be, I plan to rejoice. And I think that's that.
It's good, man.
Yeah.
Like that.
Well, I hope so. I think it's a good answer. Taylor, this has been our 50th episode, and I mentioned it at least 50 times by now, but coming into these podcast episodes, I don't really know what we're talking about. I was talking with a friend earlier today, and I was like, yeah, we don't really plan for the episodes. We just kind of we have a couple of things that we know we're going to talk about, but everything else is just going to be what it's going to be.
Yeah. It's just happy to be here.
It's just happy to be here, man. But yeah, that's today's episode. I want to apologize because Pancake was most definitely barking throughout half the episode. He was rejoicing. He heard us talk about rejoicing. He was like, "Well, let me show you how to do it."
Yeah. He's like, "Yes, I will rejoice.
I will, and I'll show you how to do it the right way." He didn't hear the part about how it can be a quiet exhale. So we have some more training to do. Taylor, with that, thanks for joining me for another episode of the Just Happy to Be Here podcast. I am certainly just happy to have you as a co-host of this podcast.
Man, and I can't phrase a better follow-up than that, so I'll just say ditto.
Ditto. I like it. I like it. Well, I hope that this episode was a little better than mediocre at best, but if not, it was part 2. So with that, hey, thanks to everybody who's following along with the podcast, for sending your feedback, even the bad feedback, like, hey, we can only hear one of you. That was actually really good feedback. I needed to know that. Great feedback. Yeah, great feedback. Didn't want to hear it, but no one wants to hear about the mistakes they make. If you have any questions, or you want us to talk about anything, or want to say hello, you can send us an email to writtentospeak@gmail.com, or find us on any of the social media platforms somewhere in the pocket of the zippered pants of the internet.
Bringing it all back.
Bringing it all back. We call that full circle because, after all, Taylor, we are professional podcasters. All right, that's that. We've had a good time, and we are gonna now fade it out into some music, and we are gently floating away Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?